All right, so buckle up because today we are diving into a controversy that seems like it's everywhere online right now. Dr. Disrespect's comeback, but like with a whole lot of baggage. We're talking accusations, apologies that kind of backfired. It's a lot. And you know our listeners sent in a ton of stuff on this, articles, Reddit threads, the works. So clearly people want to dissect this thing.
And for good reason, honestly. This isn't just your average gaming news cycle. This goes way deeper, right? It's about how we deal with serious accusations against people we're fans of those figures we put on a pedestal. How do we reconcile that support with potential harm?
Exactly. And just in case anyone's been living under a rock, we're talking about Dr. Disrespect, Guy Beam in real life, who's built this whole persona online. I mean, he's like a pro wrestler from the 80s, starred in an action movie, constantly amped up, ready to win.
And that persona. It's earned him a huge following, but it's also got him into some hot water before. Remember that Twitch ban back in 2020? Yeah, well, now that he's back on YouTube, those past shadows are resurfacing.
And this time, it's serious stuff. We're talking accusations of inappropriate messages, specifically to a minor, which just adds this whole other layer of complexity. It's not just about breaking some platform's rules anymore. This is about potential harm, power dynamics, the responsibility that comes with having millions watching you.
Exactly. This situation forces us to ask some really tough questions. How do we reconcile our enjoyment of someone's content when there's a possibility they've caused harm? And what about platforms like Twitch or YouTube? What's their responsibility in all of this?
Especially when you think about the kind of relationship streamers build with their fans, right? It's not like watching a TV show. It's this constant back and forth, this feeling of real connection, almost like friendship. So when these sorts of allegations come out, it's a gut punch for a lot of fans.
Oh, absolutely. That parasocial relationship, as they call it, adds a whole other dimension to this controversy. So to really understand what's going on, we have to unpack the accusations themselves.
Let's do it.
Yep.
What exactly was Dr. Disrespect accused of? What started all of this?
Okay, so the initial accusation, which we know about through a former Twitch employee, was that Dr. Disrespect sent inappropriate DMs, direct messages, to a minor. This was back in 2017, allegedly. And he was using Twitch's Whisper function, which is basically their private messaging feature.
And if I remember correctly, there weren't a lot of details initially because of all those NDAs, non-disclosure agreements that are always around these situations.
You got it. That lack of transparency just threw gasoline on the rumor fire. And then, when Dr. Disrespect finally addressed it, his response was, to put it lightly, vague.
Oh, totally. His whole no wrongdoing was acknowledged statement.
Yeah.
It felt like he was dodging the issue, not actually addressing it.
Right. And then he admitted to sending inappropriate messages, only to delete that admission later. It makes you wonder, was that calculated? Like he was trying to get ahead of a story he knew was coming.
It was definitely suspicious, especially since he initially avoided using the word minor in his admission. He edited in later, but that initial admission, red flag, the Reddit threads blew up instantly.
And you're right, the online reaction was completely divided. Some people were all in for Dr. Disrespect, giving him the benefit of the doubt, saying he already faced consequences for past actions.
You're talking about that cheating scandal he publicly apologized for, right? The one his wife basically made him come clean about.
Exactly. That whole thing is playing a huge role in how people are viewing this situation. It's like some feel he's already been held accountable, so why bring up the past again?
It's wild, right? Because then you have others who are saying his actions are inexcusable. It doesn't matter if it legally qualifies as something like sexting, which, by the way, is a whole other legal rabbit hole.
Oh, tell me about it. Age of consent laws are different everywhere, and proving intent when it comes to online messages. Good luck. But for many, it boils down to morality, not just what's legal. Can they continue to support him, knowing what they know now? That's what they're grappling with.
And that's a seriously tough spot for a lot of fans to be in, especially those who felt like they really connected with him, invested in his content.
It shows just how complicated these parasocial relationships are, the ethical dilemmas they bring up.
It really makes you wonder, what would it take for those fans to feel okay supporting him again, if that's even possible?
The million-dollar question, right? And it speaks to this bigger issue of accountability online.
Which leads us to Dr. Disrespect's big return stream, where he was going to reveal the truth, as he put it. He came out swinging, saying his messages weren't sexual, blaming this whole thing on a vengeful Twitch employee with a grudge.
It was a very carefully constructed narrative. He kept bringing up legal definitions, painting himself as the victim of a smear campaign. And yet, he never released the actual messages.
It was almost like he was fixated on those legal details, as if to say, I didn't break the law, so I'm good.
But as we've been talking about, there's a huge gray area here. Just because something's legal doesn't mean it's morally right, especially when there's this potential power imbalance, a popular streamer and a young fan.
100%. And that's where things start to feel done enough. It's basically trust me, but without any real proof to back it up.
Yeah.
And it's that lack of transparency that makes this whole thing feel kind of icky, you know? Like it goes beyond just a he said, she said situation. We're talking about the potential for real harm, especially with the age difference involved.
100%. This is a really important reminder that these online controversies have real-life consequences. We're not talking about abstract ideas here. We're talking about actual people who can be hurt.
And we can't just ignore the whole persona thing with Dr. Disrespect, right? He's built his career on being this over-the-top character, this larger-than-life personality.
It's almost as if he's hiding behind that persona now, using it as a shield. Like he can just say, come on guys, it's all part of the act, or you're just not getting the character. But at what point does that excuse stop working?
Right, and you have to wonder, how much of that resonates with his fans? Especially the younger ones, who might be drawn to that kind of in-your-face style. It's a tough one to unpack.
For sure. And speaking of unpacking, those Reddit threads you sent, talk about a rabbit hole, they give you this really interesting glimpse into how people are processing this whole thing.
Seriously. It's like the comments section exploded. You've got people fiercely defending him, others who are totally disillusioned, and then a whole bunch of folks somewhere in between.
It's a perfect example of that whole debate around cancel culture, and when someone messes up, are they really canceled forever? Do we separate the art from the artist? Or is that impossible these days? Especially with social media, where these streamers feel like, well, friends.
Especially since some people are bringing up that cheating scandal again.
Yeah.
It's like, because he addressed that so publicly, some fans are more willing to give him the benefit of the doubt this time around too.
It's almost like they're thinking, well, he owned up to his mistakes before, so we trust him to do it again. But this feels different, right? That the potential harm here feels way more serious.
No question. And that's what I find so fascinating about this whole situation. It's not just about one streamer's actions. It's about online culture crashing into how we see celebrities and how our digital lives have real consequences.
Couldn't have said it better myself. This is bigger than just the gaming world. This is about online safety, the power these influencers have, and how we build a healthier internet for everyone.
So where do we go from here? We've got accusations flying around, denials, a ton of speculation. But the bottom line is, we still don't have concrete answers.
Yeah.
What does this mean for Dr. Disrespect's future? What about his fans? What happens to them?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's tough to say how this plays out. Does this whole thing blow over? Do his fans stick by him? Or does this permanently damage his reputation? It's really up in the air.
It's interesting you say that, because going through those Reddit threads, one thing that really jumped out was this underlying sense of unease. Like, even his biggest supporters, there's this lingering doubt. Those deleted messages, that whole minor thing, it really stuck with people.
It's like they say, you can't unring a bell. Right. Even if he's telling the truth, even if those messages were blown out of proportion, the doubt's still there. And in the court of public opinion, that kind of doubt is hard to erase.
And then there's the fact that he's not releasing those messages. I get it. Legally, it makes sense. But it also raises even more suspicion.
It's like this black hole of information, and you know what happens with black holes. They suck in everything, including speculation and assumptions. People start wondering, okay, what's he hiding? What's he so afraid of?
It also brings up this whole thing about transparency online. What are we actually allowed to know about the people we follow online? And shouldn't they be more open and honest with their audience, especially when something like this comes up?
It's tricky, that's for sure. There are no easy answers here. But this whole situation with Dr. Disrespect really highlights why we need to have these tough conversations, even if they're uncomfortable.
Because what's crystal clear is, this isn't just some contained story about gaming. This is about how fame is changing, about how messy these online relationships are, about the fact that what we do online has consequences in the real world. This whole thing has been a wild ride, hasn't it? And that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating, don't you think? It's not just about Dr. Disrespect and what he did or didn't do. It's like this perfect example of what's messed up and, frankly, kind of scary about internet culture today.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. It's like we're suddenly seeing close up all these uncomfortable truths about fandom, about online accusations, about how we decide who to cancel and all that. It's a lot.
We've talked about the accusations, the apologies that felt kind of weak, the way people online are reacting. It's been all over the place.
Yeah.
But you know, the thing that keeps sticking with me, even if we give Dr. Disrespect the benefit of the doubt, even if those messages were totally innocent, there's still this question of judgment, you know?
Right. Like, it's fine to have a crazy persona, but when does that become an excuse for doing something that crosses a line? It makes you wonder, at what point do you look at yourself and say, okay, this is going too far?
And that's where things get really real for our listeners, especially those deep in the gaming world. It's easy to get sucked into the drama, pick a side, defend your favorite streamers. But this whole situation, it's so messy, there's so many unanswered questions. It forces you to take a step back and think.
It really does. We have to think critically about what we're seeing online, especially from people we admire. Someone can be entertaining and still mess up, still hurt others. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive.
And it's made me think a lot about my own boundaries. Like, at what point do you say, you know what, I'm done, I can't support this person anymore, even if I used to love their content?
That's such a personal question, and it's different for everyone. But it's something we all have to be willing to ask ourselves, especially now when so much of our lives play out online.
Exactly. Because like we've been saying, these aren't just virtual interactions, right? What happens online affects us in the real world. How we see things, our values, our relationships, it's all connected.
It's all connected, and it all comes down to personal responsibility. We have to be aware of what we're doing online, think critically about the information we come across, and be brave enough to speak up when something's not right, even when it's uncomfortable.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave everyone with this. Imagine for a second you can rewind, go back to before any of this came out. Knowing what you know now, what would you say to Dr. Disrespect? And what would you tell your past self about dealing with this kind of situation online?
Those are great questions, and honestly, I think everyone listening should really take some time to ponder those, because at the end of the day, the answers are different for everyone, and they usually come from those quiet moments of self-reflection.